Hi, everyone. Brian Kilmeade here. Thanks so much for listening. We got a big hour coming your way. Sadly, I have a school shooting to try to watch at the same time as do the show. It happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The police are responding to a shooting. It looks like there are fatalities. It looks like a grammar school to 8th grade and as the kids are being brought out, the school uniforms are prevalent. And we'll try to get some details there. The local people are commenting, and the shooter we know is dead. We just don't know any details, and the motive obviously is one of the last things to come. So with that, let's get to Karl Rove. Karl, Deputy Chief of Staff for George W. Bush, Fox News contributor, best-selling author. Karl, here we go again. Again, this is in Minneapolis. I mean, we had the horrific that shooting of these politicians, and now we have something else going on in this city.
Yeah, so sad. I mean, school is coming back, and the last thing a parent wants to worry about is their child going into a battle zone, and so sad. Absolutely.
We'll follow that story as it happens. So, Karl, let's talk about what's happening with crime in this country. Over 80% of the people say it's a problem that needs to be addressed. 54% approve of the way the president's handling it, but almost every Democrat is mocking the president and daring him to put National Guard in and do what they're doing in D.C. You have Illinois, Governor Hochul here in New York, and Governor Gavin Newsom, of course, and Mayor Bass of Los Angeles last month. Your thoughts about how this is all playing out?
Yeah, look, if you go back through history, the big cities in our country, the Democrat mayors were, sort of blue collar, working class, many places Catholic, and they had a great relationship with the first responders, the police and the firemen and the first responders, the BMS people. They tended to be Democrats because they lived in a Democrat town. And yet, as the Democratic Party became increasingly, sort of soft on crime, whether it was in the 1960s when President Richard Nixon got elected by speaking out on behalf of the silent majority, and campaigning on law and order, or take New York, your city. In the late 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, it declined in safety, and they did an amazing thing. They elected a Republican mayor for the first time in 40 some odd years, and then followed him with it. Remember Mike Bloomberg, when he first ran in 2001, was running as a Republican. I mean, we had Dick Reardon out in California and Los Angeles, Republican mayor of Los Angeles. Why? In part because of concerns about disorder in the streets. And the Democrats don't seem to get it. They don't seem to get that when they stand up and say, defund the police or cashless bail or it's not really a problem. I mean, people, particularly in New York, see it in so many aspects of their life that they know that's not true.
And in fact, they said it. I mean, you're watching what's happening in Minneapolis now as they're mysteriously, it baffles me, they're having their autopsy in front of the cameras. I mean, and listen to some of this meltdown. Listen to this woman, Ada Baracino, a DNC member, Cut 32.
I'm from California, and just like Florida, we've had a tremendous amount of raids. We're dealing with different circumstances here, but I've said this a lot, but Latinos in California are dealing with this ICE crisis that mirrors, I think we're living worse times than the times of sorry about that, of the pandemic. It is just grueling.
She all goes on to say that even people, just Hispanics that are there legally, still aren't going to work because they're so concerned, so afraid.
Yeah.
Is that how you read the crackdown on immigration?
Look, that whole meeting was weird. I mean, they could not bring themselves to say illegals. It was documented and undocumented. In fact, it was sort of a litany. They kept saying that. They would refer to the American people and say, well, it's both documented and undocumented. Look, imagine what would happen if the Democrats stood up and said, you know what, we stand with the president in finding these criminals who have violated our laws and threatened the safety of our neighborhoods and our communities and getting them off the streets and out of the country. But where we draw the line is people who came here, unfortunately, illegally, many of them many years ago. And since then, they've contributed to our economy and to our society, and they've kept their nose clean and paid their taxes and been, good residents of our communities. And we want to draw a line there. I mean, it would at least put them on the right side when it came to crime and law and order, and it would give them something where frankly, the majority of the American people agree with them. People in this country overwhelmingly want to do something to get the people who are bad actors off of the streets and out of our country. They have a different attitude towards people who have come here and have tried to make a life and have kept their nose clean and contributed to our economy and their communities.
I'm not one of them. I think that if people have been here over 10 years, 15 years, and they can get their boss to sign off on them, there could be some extended work visa, not citizenship.
Right.
I'm for that. And I never even would bring it up because I would say, first you got to seal the border. And I never thought it was going to be sealed, and they did it. So having said that, I think we have a possibility. But I was shocked to see a poll that said 53% of Republicans are for everybody here illegally out. You must have seen that. Yeah.
Well, I'm with you. I'm not with that 53%. And frankly, I think the more that happens, the smaller that number is going to be, because they're going to realize what an economic problem that's going to be. I'm like you. No guarantee of citizenship. If you want to become a citizen, go to the back of the line. Wait the next 18 years. But in the meantime, we want your employer to track you. So we give a report every year, that you're behaving. We're going to check to make certain you're paying your taxes, that you don't violate the law. And, let's, as a country, say if we've got gang members coming into this country and we've got violent representatives of, violence in our communities because of people who come here illegally, get them and get rid of them. But and Democrats would be smart to do that. But instead, that whole meeting was like, it started so weirdly. They had that woman who stood up, a member of the DNC from Minnesota, an Indian American and representative of the Dakota tribe. And the first thing she does is stand up and say, I am a indigenous queer woman. Well, really, have we gotten to the point where you can't simply say, I'm, Susie Jones, representative, of the National Committee here. And then she goes and does the acknowledgement of, how terrible that we, the Dakotas, who were responsible for the entire Mississippi River, and you stole our land and blah, 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 blah. But that's how they began their meeting. And most Americans, if they bothered to tune into that, would say, who are you people? How weird are you? That wasn't normal. And if anything, Americans want normality in their politics, and these strange, it's worse than COVID. Well, let me tell you, I was in COVID. We all were. Today is not worse than COVID. It's just not. And, when Democrats seem like they're out of touch with ordinary people, they are out of touch.
But, Karl, here's the thing. They're obsessed with Trump, even worse in many ways than 2016 to 2020. They thought they were just going to get rid of him, and they got him on Russia, and then they got to get him again on the Ukraine conversation. And now that he's back, they're still obsessed with him. Does anyone have a big picture to understand that Trump is going to be done? And there's got to be a way to fight another day. In fact, the bulk of their game plan is going to come to fruition in 2028. Why are they focusing on what they don't like about Trump the entire time?
Yeah, well, they ought to be focused on finding ways to say to the American people, we're with you and he isn't. And, we have a vision that he's not about making your life better, and he doesn't care about that. But instead, they got to stand up and say, I'm an indigenous queer woman, and, shame on you for taking the Dakota lands away from us and creating the state of Minnesota. And let's have a big debate about whether or not we're going to simply cut off all aid to Israel or whether we're going to castigate Israel. That was their choice. It's just, and you're right. The anger at Trump, the speech by the Democratic National Chairman where he basically said, I'm going to be as vulgar and as angry and use as many nasty words as I think Donald Trump is using against us. And look, he is inside their brain. And everything that they do is a response to him. And when the reality, if they were smart, they'd be saying, what is it that we need to do to get ourselves back in the good graces with the American voter?
And that's what they should do. And what you do is you got to try to make people's lives better and say, look, the border's been sealed. Would have done it differently, but this is where we go from here. When it comes to inflation, we spent too much early on, but the president has brought it down I'll give him as quick as he said he was going to. But it's still at 2.6%. He wants it at 2%. And he's not the first president to harangue a Fed chairman. So, because he wants the interest rates down. And for the most part, almost every economist here in the Fox Business Channel, not just Larry Kudlow, thinks they should be down. So that's Trump's style. So I'm very curious to see if they're going to get a game plan. I know Ezra Klein wrote a book to say, we're annoying people. I watched Fareed Zakaria, meaning Democrats are. We're just annoying people. The cancel culture, the judgmentalness, the apologizing for America is not working. I watched Fareed Zakaria say, why don't we just admit it? Every major city has got crime problems and infrastructure problems, and it's run by Democrats. You know that he hated saying that. But at some point, someone should, I would love it for the country, for someone like Joe Manchin, if he's the right person, if he was younger, to walk up and just say, hey, this is what I like Trump's doing, this is what I don't, this is why I'd be different. I would love a Harold Ford. I would feel so much better about the country if there was a Harold Ford type politician running against whether it's Trump or a Bush or whatever. Then I just say the country is not going to be dramatically different no matter who wins. But if there is a left-wing reaction to Trump and an AOC becomes president, can you imagine the head-snapping change?
Well, first of all, if they ran an AOC, they'd lose. Think about this, Brian. Think about this. You mentioned California earlier, and you had the woman from California, DNC member. Think about this. Remember, we had the soft-on-crime prosecutor, Boudin, in San Francisco, recalled because he was too soft on crime. We had school board members in San Francisco recalled because they wanted to change the name of Abraham Lincoln High School.
Yep.
We had the George Cascone, the DA in Los Angeles, beaten. I think it was 65-35 by Nathan Hochman, who's a Republican in the city of Los Angeles. We had the prosecutor in Alameda County, Oakland, very liberal. Berkeley, California is there. She was recalled because she was too soft on crime. And, we have these instances, Portland, Oregon, we had the soft on crime prosecutor in Multnomah County. You talk about a left wing part of the country. My uncle used to live there. Man, God dang, talk about the left wing. And he gets defeated by a career prosecutor who is a lifelong registered Republican. Imagine what would happen to the Democrats if they got 10% fewer votes in cities like New York and Boston and Chicago and San Francisco and Los Angeles. I mean, literally, they're getting beaten in these places by people who are conservative on crime and, in some instances, registered Republicans.
I know you're not a math guy, but you seem to know everything about everything. But when you see the tariff money coming in, controversial wherever you stand on tariffs, it's okay. Conservatives are like Larry and other people fundamentally have been against it. Stephen Moore has been against it, but they're seeing the revenue come in. Are you thinking to yourself, we have to do things like this to try to balance our budget and reorganize our trade? Is this a way to begin to reduce the deficit?
Well, the money has to go to reduce the deficit. That is to say, we've got to control spending and take whatever money's tax revenues are coming in and apply them to reducing the annual debt. The annual deficit, and thereby reducing the growth of the national deficit. But let's be clear. I know about tariffs. I wrote a book about Mr. Protection himself, William McKinley. The $300 billion this year. Part of that will be paid by the companies that are importing those goods by shaving their margins. Some of it will be paid for by the people who sell us that by cutting their margins. Some of it will be taken care of in the play between the currencies. But the vast bulk of it is going to be paid by the consumer. So we're putting whatever it is, 200,
it's not there 250
million. $250 billion tax ultimately on the consumers. In the first quarter of the year, or the first half of the year, that may have been mostly the companies selling and the companies buying, but ultimately it's going to be the consumer who buys it. You cannot put a 25% tariff on a good and expect the company to be already making a 25% profit. That's not how the world works. Profit margins outside of tech are not that big. So, there are two issues here. A, make certain that any additional revenues we've got go not to more spending, but to reducing the amount of money that we are running in the red each year, and hopefully reduce the deficit. But second of all, let's recognize it's a tax on people that is not progressive at all. It's going to fall with the same impact upon a family making $80,000 a year. They're going to pay X percent more on what they buy, as well as somebody who's got a much larger income. And as a result, it's going to be harder for people in the middle and the bottom to deal with these. You send your kids back to school this fall, and you're buying tennis shoes that are made in fill in the blank Malaysia, and you're buying jeans that are being fabricated in Bangladesh, and you're going to pay 20 or 25% more for them. That's just the way of the world.
We'll see.
When you slap a 25% tariff on them.
Or that Malaysian group opens up a factory in America within 2 years, and they avoid everything. And that's part of the other goal of this, right?
Well, you may be right about some things, but there are certain industries that are low cost, are low wage, low-skilled jobs that are simply not coming back. We are not going to be making blue jeans in the United States in the foreseeable future, not on a mass scale. We're not going to be making tennis shoes.
To save money,
right.
To save money, I'm going to begin making my own. I'm buying sheets of blue jeans, and I'm going to take my measurements a little bit later. Karl Rove, always insightful, always great. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So school shootings going on again. School's back. Most places haven't even back yet. In the East, we wait till after Labor Day. They do it earlier in different places. Minneapolis, as an example, a Catholic school was just under fire. 15 to 20 students, 15 to 20 are hurt. I'm not sure who students, teachers, security. But now it looks like 6 children are being treated at Children's Hospital. I imagine students. We'll try to find out more details, but we know the shooter's dead. It looks like he took his own life. Chris Swecker joins us now. Chris, former assistant director of the FBI. Chris, from what we know, what could you tell our audience about the incident that took place about an hour ago?
Yeah, Brian, it appears that someone dressed in black with possibly an AK shooting .223 rounds, which are high-powered rounds, was outside a Catholic church in Minneapolis and fired inside. By all reports thus far, I mean, the facts are still coming in, but thus far what we think is that this shooter shot from the outside in. That may change, but when we hear or see the press conference from local law enforcement, but be that as it may, there are multiple casualties. It's beyond tragic. Young children. I do school security assessments. In fact, I did a Catholic church very recently, a pretty large one in the school. And when you have young children, it becomes a lot more complicated because they don't have options. You can't do run, hide, fight with young children. You almost have to lock them down because it just gets too chaotic and they don't have the judgment to do the run and hide part that has to be done for them. So, they're all congregated in one place. Again, this is your worst nightmare. If they're in classrooms, you can seal them off, ideally with just one push of an access control button. But in this case, they're all gathered in one place. So some of these injuries may be from glass, some may be from just stampeding. We'll see. We'll pray that they're minor injuries.
So you said outside a church or outside the school? There's a church next to the school?
They were. My information is they were in a mass. They were in a mass that's held before school or during school, and they were all in the chapel. That may change, and my information may not be correct, but that's what I'm hearing.
So a guy in a mask, since dead. Did you also heard they took his own life?
I've read that. What we're hearing is the shooter is down, and there's no further threat. I have heard that he took his own life. I've not heard that responders or whether there was a school resource officer there that exchanged fire. I mean, we haven't heard that he's down at the hands of law enforcement. The majority of the reports, or all the reports I've heard, it was by his own hand.
So what do you want to, if your kid was going to school right now, no matter who's ever listening to us, might have a kid, grandkid, whatever it is, they might be in school right now, what do you ask that school to see if they are ready to handle something like this?
Yeah, as I said, I do a lot of school security assessments, universities as well. You want to make sure that they have deterrence in place, that is visible security. So I always 100% of the time recommend an armed off-duty police officer. That's your first choice. You know, you can hire private guards, but you need a police presence. I know that a lot of schools don't want that, that martial-looking appearance of an officer outside, but these are the times that we live in. And number two, they have to have access controls so that they can control access during classes, during activities that are taking place during the day. You want an early warning system in place where if red flags are raised, as there were at Parkland, that you have a small team of different people from different different disciplines that can come together and assess the threat and decide how to intervene if there's an opportunity for intervention. That follow those red flags. There's a whole myriad of things. You have to train your security response, your crisis response, and make sure that everybody knows what to do. Again, a lot of schools don't want to do that because they don't want to scare the kids and the staff. But we live in these times. What you see today, you have to have a well-trained, well-defined response. And you can't be guessing what you're going to do. There has to be a notification system that's reliable, that can get to as many people as possible and give them the information they need to either lock down or implement some other crisis protocol.
The other thing would be in Minneapolis in particular, they seem to be somewhat unhinged. The cops are overmatched. What are they,
right.
400 cops down? So it's maybe not easy. I know in my town, they have a different surge alert. So we have all these grammar schools and high schools within a certain radius, and we have people planted and just waiting. If they had the surge, they'll be there in 3 minutes. When you don't have a lot of resources, you don't have a lot of cops, it's hard to get retired cops to do that. That's what we got, retired cops looking to surge in situations like that.
Yeah, ideally, the gold standard for security at a school or a university or even a church sometimes is to have an off-duty police officer with a marked unit parked somewhere nearby to deter anyone from doing something like this. And I dealt with this as the head of security for Bank of America. When we put armed guards outside the bank, they didn't get robbed. It'd take a really crazy person to try to shoot it out with an armed police officer. And when I say armed police officer, I mean someone who has the resources of the police department at his fingertips. One walkie-talkie call or one HT call, and he can get he can invoke an emergency response that has the entire shift coming in your direction and very quickly. So a lot of universities, a lot of schools don't like to have this type of look outside their school. But in this day and age, I think it's absolutely necessary, and you have to bite the bullet and deal with the expenses of it. It's not that expensive.
Yeah, what does it say about the mindset of the shooter, that they're going for children, that they're going for targets? They don't want to be in a gunfight. They want to slaughter. Awful.
It has to be a special type of mental illness or evil that does this sort of thing. It's not the first time we've seen it. Uvalde, Columbine, others, and it takes a very sick person to do this. As you said, Brian, especially with young kids, and this appears to be targeted. Doesn't look like this is an accident, that they were all congregated in one place at the same time. And this person who was dressed in black, with a high-powered rifle, shoots into the mass that was taking place. That is a targeted situation. We know that. We don't know this, but I highly suspect this is not random. And I know that by now these probably been identified, and they're at his house or his car, trying to get his devices, trying to sort of backtrack, do a thorough analysis of his social media presence and his contacts, and try to get to the bottom of why he did this. Why would he do this?
Good question. Why would he? I mean, that's going to be the ultimate thing. And of course, somebody's going to be twisted, be able to do that. And we'll find out. And that's going to be the big debate on guns. You have to know 50 states. And please don't feel bad if you don't. But do you know the gun laws in Minnesota? I know it's a big hunting state. But do you know?
Yeah.
Because that's what we always hear. It's going to be about the gun laws. If you talk to the Democrats, it's going to be about the gun. You talk to Republicans, it's going to be the people need psychological help.
Yeah, there's local gun laws, and I don't know, what Minneapolis has. There's federal gun laws as well. And some states, as you know, are more restrictive. Some are more liberal. Texas, and of course, and where I am in North Carolina, you need a permit. I mean, you can carry openly. You can do open carry, if you will. But if you have a concealed weapon, you need to get a permit. What I always look at, and this is a discussion that's held every single time, is this idea of a red flag law, which as a former law enforcement officer, I like. If someone is flashing red, if you will, especially if they're tender years or they're young and they there's a thing called a domestic violence restraining order that you can get for domestic violence. Well, this would be no different. You would get a restraining order to prevent some person from getting their hands on this type of weapon. I think it's something that law enforcement would appreciate. Most of the law enforcement colleagues of mine think it's a good idea if it's implemented the right way. It gives you at least one opportunity, and this would have happened in Parkland, to get, to prevent guns from falling into the hands of someone like this.
I know you got to run. You're high on demand. Chris Swecker, thanks so much. Appreciate your analysis.
Thank you.
All right. We're following this school shooting at Annunciation Catholic School. It's been in existence in Minneapolis since 1923. A church is just down the block from the school. It's grammar school up until 8th grade. So we think between 10 and 15 have been hurt. It seems 5 kids are being hospitalized at a children's hospital nearby. So we're just following this other breaking story that there's been a shooting in Minneapolis at a Catholic school. It looks like there are fatalities. The gunman's dead. Sadly, we've been through this so many times before. I'll give you the details as we get them, but let's make the transition to happiness. Not easy, but we'll do it. Dr. Arthur Brooks does it every day. He's a Harvard professor, teaches a course on that, Atlantic columnist, host of Office Hours podcast, and best-selling author, and this book's certainly to be best-selling as well. It's called The Happiness Files, Insights on Work and Life. Arthur, welcome back.
Hey, Brian. Nice to see you, as always.
What do you bring to the table here in this? Is this more of what you learned teaching this class, or how you've evolved learning more about this?
Well, this new book, The Happiness Files, is the 33 most popular columns I've written in the Atlantic for the past 5 years. And it's basically a manual on how to enjoy your job more, how to make other people happier around you, and how to come home a happier person when you come home from work is what it comes down to.
What if you don't like that job?
If you don't like that job, then it talks about how you can make it into something that's actually more productive until you can find a new job. Here's the thing. I was doing a show not long ago, a television show, and somebody in the studio audience, I was talking to the studio audience, and somebody said, I feel like a drone in a cubicle. I hate my job. What can I do? And the answer is, you actually make life better for the people around you. Go to the break room at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and come back with a fresh cup of coffee and say to the guy in the next cubicle, you look like you can use a fresh cup of coffee, and look at the look on his face. The truth is, lighten the load for somebody else. You'll feel better today, and you'll become that guy.
So instead of focusing on your happiness, you go ahead and try to make somebody else happy, and you'll get that
This is the secret. If you want help, be the helper, is what it comes down to. Give the thing that you actually want to get. The same thing is true in every part of life, Brian. I mean, you and I have been married men for a super long time, and we all know that when you're feeling hostility towards your wife, the first thing you should give is more love, notwithstanding your feelings, and everything's going to be better. Give the thing you want to get.
I actually didn't know I should do that, but I just learned something now, and I got that for free.
No, when you're actually feeling like, I want to avoid her, that's when you say, bring it in.
So Zig Ziglar had something very similar, if I see if I can get this right. You can get what you want if you help enough people get what they want.
Right. That's true. That's certainly true in sales. But one of the great truths in life is you can get what you want by giving other people what you want. That's what it comes down to, because other people want the same thing. They want courtesy. You don't feel like being courteous because the airline is delaying your flight. Be courteous, despite your feelings. You'll manage yourself, and you'll get more of the thing that you actually want. Feel better about yourself starting today.
When's the last time you really felt like you were angry? And obviously, in your line of work, you probably felt bad about it. But you go to the airline attendant, and they're not telling you the truth about your plane, and you could have gone on another plane, and you're late for work, and you got to get to Harvard, you got to teach a class, you got a column that could have been done, but your computer's in your luggage, and you can't even work on what you're supposed to do. So you're frustrated. When's the last time you felt those emotions and let that dominate your mindset?
Well, I have an advantage on this, which is that I teach happiness and I do happiness in public, and people sometimes recognize me in airports, and it's a bad look if I'm being a jerk. Being committed to being a happiness professor makes you nicer is what it comes down to. I mean, the truth is I feel emotions just like everybody else. There's a part of your brain that actually processes emotions automatically. It's called the limbic system. The problem is that when you're being managed by your emotions as opposed to managing your emotions, and I've gotten much better, especially over the past 20 years, of managing my own emotions because I know the science on how to get it done, and that's a lot of what I teach and what I speak and write about, and that's this book in my podcast, Office Hours, and in this new book, The Happiness Files, you learn how to manage yourself.
The relationship between wealth and security and happiness. Yeah,
money doesn't buy happiness. What it does is it eliminates sources of unhappiness, is what you find. And so happiness and unhappiness are not opposites. That, as a matter of fact, they're processed in different parts of the brain. And what happens with money is that when you have very, very little of it, your unhappiness from avoidable sources is pretty high. And money can actually eliminate those sources. But don't go looking for the happiness that you really want by getting more money. That's not going to work. What brings more happiness is more love.
So when I talked to Phil Knight, he said, I was reading his book and stressed reading it. He's trying to get the sneakers done. He can't make his payments. He can't make his payroll. He gets the money. He doesn't get the money. The interest rate's too high. He's worried about the Japanese delivering.
Right.
And I read this and I said, man, aren't you glad that's over?
Yeah.
When you go through that, he goes, no, I loved it.
Yeah.
Can you love something that appears stressful?
Yeah, all the time. High performers are addicted to it, as a matter of fact. And everybody can actually learn and grow from the most anxious periods of their lives. That's one of the reasons that people always look back to the times when they were sad in college and look back on it and laugh with the friends that they had during that period, because they learned a lot during that. I say, hey, Brian, tell me about when you really understood best the meaning of your life. You're not going to tell me about that week at Disneyland. You're going to talk about things that were hard for you, hard parts of the early part of your career, that you persisted, that you were resilient, and that's a really important thing. And really successful people figure that out.
What do you do with, how do you get, if you're trying to get to the mountaintop like an Olympian and you get your gold medal? This is the best example. In life, your gold medal might be CEO of something, or it might be the vice presidency, or it might be
graduating from college.
Or your dry cleaning company finally is successful, whatever it is. When you get that, inevitably they say there's a letdown after.
Yeah.
Does that show you that you were doing it for the wrong reasons?
No. What that is, that's called a rival fallacy. So we in the world of psychology, the problem is that we love progress toward a goal. We have to have goals in life. You got to have goals. That's called purpose, and purpose is part of the meaning of life. It's a serious business, and you got to make progress toward those goals, and that gives you that gives you desire, that gives you motivation, and it gives you a lot of happiness. The problem is that you make the mistake of thinking that when you actually acquire the thing, you get the goal, that then you'll be happier than you ever were before, and it's going to last. And that's wrong. That's the reason that a lot of Olympic gold medalists suffer depression. Your emotions don't persist. They're not supposed to persist. That's not why they actually exist. And so you need to understand that. And the answer is intention without attachment.
Love it. What a cliffhanger. The name of the book is The Happiness Files, Insights on Work and Life. Arthur Brooks, thanks so much. Pick up the book. Let's get to the big three first.
Number 3.
New Yorkers rightfully have concerns around public safety, and I want to empower police officers to respond to serious crime and hire the mental health professionals to respond to mental health calls.
Really? Good luck with that. More concerning, by the way, New York mayor's race. A speech from Mamdani. Zohan reveals more disturbing, ridiculous beliefs and speeches on crime that he won't walk back, as Andrew Cuomo gets blasted for making taxpayers pay out to up to $20 million for his defense. Is this really the best we can do in New York City? Curtis Sliwa, Eric Adams, step up.
Number 2.
Oh, I think he's going after blue states. It's just part of a larger strategy to create chaos. Let's look at the crime rates in Houston, in Dallas, in Miami. I can give you a whole list of every other city, the majority of which are in red states.
But they're highest in blue. Disorder is the order of the day in blue cities, and I guess it's perfectly okay in New York and Chicago as they grandstand to make sure that Trump doesn't send in the National Guard. The problem is 66% of the country think crime is a major problem, and 81% want to see something done about it.
Number 1.
I want to get it stopped because it's a lot of lives that are being lost. Every week, the one that I thought would be the easiest is turning out to be the hardest. That's President Putin and President Zelensky, but I think I'll get it done.
Going nowhere. Gaza talks ramble on and Ukraine and Russia fight on. Time for Trump to rotate out or get Steve Witkoff some help because he's not getting results. And then last night, he was Bret Baier's guest, and Bret is host of Special Report, Fox News' chief political anchor, and his upcoming book, To Rescue the American Spirit, can be pre-ordered now. It's excellent. Teddy Roosevelt and the Birth of a Superpower. Bret, welcome.
Morning.
A little frustrated. Steve Witkoff is doing the Hamas, doing Iran, Russia, Ukraine. It just seems like the whole thing is just spinning its wheels to the point in Iran, they just went ahead and just blew up the nuclear facilities ourselves. But do you think he needs some help in there?
Yeah, I don't know. I talked to him for a while, obviously last night on the show, and then afterwards. He needs a W, and I think that there hasn't been a real W on the board when it comes to diplomacy. They've moved the needle, they say. They've changed the dynamic, but there's no evidence that Putin is suddenly going to this bilateral talk with Zelensky. There's no evidence that either side is going to get to a solution. I mean, the Ukrainians are not giving up Donetsk, where they have a lot of forces. So I think there is a frustration, and you wonder how long President Trump, who is all about the W, the win, is going to, continue on this path. They need to change something in both scenarios. Witkoff said that by the end of the year, he's predicting they'll have an end to the Hamas and Israel situation. But again, where is the light at the end of the tunnel?
Here he is talking about, let's first talk about what's happening in Gaza and what's holding up the ceasefire. This is what he told you, cut 9.
Hamas,
Sorry,
100%.
Yes, there's been a deal on the table for the last 6 or 7 weeks that would have released 10 of the hostages out of the 20 who we think are alive.
But what I don't understand, Bret, is I heard Hamas agreed to that. So, and I was looking before the show, before the Fox and Friends, I didn't see any walking back from Hamas, whatever you can say about their communications. You usually know where they stand. And so it doesn't seem like Netanyahu wants to take the deal that was offered 6 or 7 weeks ago. And maybe that's fine. What? Well, why? Why don't you want to take it? Tell me. Because that's what the Hamas evidently said that. Am I right?
You're right. You're right. And, there's always this dance where Hamas says, this is what we're going to do, and then they step back, or Netanyahu says that's totally unacceptable, and we're going to keep on launching this attack against Hamas. I said, what is more important, the destruction and elimination of Hamas or getting those hostages out? And he said both, but we haven't seen it. They believe there's 10 still alive and 10 dead.
Oh, really? I thought they had 20 left and they're only getting 10 out. You think 10, we're down to 10?
Yeah.
Wow.
10 and 10. Yeah.
So that's where basically out right now. Well, Hamas knows if they get the hostages out, then what's happened, they'll just, the IDF will follow through. So if those hostages, they're going to go in anyway. So it looks like the IDF is preparing to go in, and yet there were 350,000 people on the streets of Israel protesting that they're going into there without getting the hostages out. So it's not easy on any side.
No, and these are all complex situations and dynamics. It's just that it's the frustrating part is that there is this portrayal of optimism every time you talk about it on both fronts. And I just don't see where that optimism is coming from.
Either do I. I want you to go to Russia real quick before we move on. And Sergei Lavrov said this earlier this week, cut 7.
Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky when the agenda would be ready for a summit. And this agenda is not ready at all.
Really? Well, what are they looking for? Are they?
Yeah.
I mean, so I thought the one thing that I thought was agreed on, that they were going to allow an international security force to be on the ground in Ukraine. And Lavrov said, no, we never agreed to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is the traditional Russian dance, right? I mean, they go to the edge, then they go back. And, Lavrov in the same sentence said that Zelensky is an illegitimate president. President Trump yesterday called that posturing and BS. But unless you're going to put the pinch on Russia, unless you're going to put the squeeze on them economically, which you can do, and we saw it with secondary sanctions on India, immediately Russia said, let's talk. That's because they were feeling that, and their economy is on the brink. And I asked about that. Why not drop the hammer if he's going to play this game where he's not going to the table? And they said that that's an option on the table, something they're thinking about.
Here's President Trump, cut 2.
I want to see that deal end. It's very, very serious what I have in mind if I have to do it. I'm talking about economic, because we're not going to get into a world war.
So economic leverage or bring the hammer down. You got the Senate bill, which is bipartisan, 85 votes. But I also heard that Ukraine's been so effective blowing up these attacking these energy sites, they're actually rationing gas in Russia. Have you heard that?
Yeah, and there's a real problem in Russia. If you start getting the central banks saying that we are in trouble, which they have been, that means that the war economy is not going to be self-fulfilling. They're going to have to do something to change the dynamic. And China has been saving them, but if secondary sanctions go on China for buying Russian oil, that's a problem.
All right, I want to talk about crime in D.C. I know you go back and forth to Florida, but have you noticed a difference?
Yeah, I've noticed a difference. I think there is a sense of, stability. I think that there are some residents that really don't like the sight of National Guard troops, out and about. Then there's some who say, we welcome this because it's a sign of safety. I think they had their first murder in 13, 14 days. That's a big difference from what has happened.
So right now, so far, the president's got 54% approval for his actions on crime. 81% of the country think crime's a problem. 66% of the country would like to see something done about it. So the president seems to be on the right side of the American people here, yet every Democratic mayor and governor says things like this. Cut 16.
Oh, I think he's going after blue states, Democratic states, states with Democratic governors, states with Democratic mayors. It's just part of a larger strategy to create chaos. We're making a difference. Why he keeps doing that, I don't know. I think because of our party affiliation. I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you what. He wants to do something useful. Let's look at the crime rates in Houston, in Dallas, in Miami. I can give you a whole list of every other city, the majority of which are in red states.
But the big difference is they actually prosecute crimes in Texas. They actually have a governor taking action in Texas. So we'll use the Texas National Guard if they had to. But I think what Kathy Hochul's forgetting is that she was the one who used the National Guard in the subways. She did a year ago. She goes, people need to have a sense of security in the subways again. And I would love to see, Bret, the people in urban Chicago, these working class areas of Chicago. I want to find out if they feel secure. They feel like crime's down because auto thefts up 79%, misdemeanor theft up 61%, burglaries up 8%. So they say murders are down 50%, but the shootings aren't. So please tell me why you don't want help.
Yeah. And so this is a political conundrum for Democrats. They want to push back on Trump. They want to call him a dictator. They want to call him an authoritarian. But the practical issue is that people in their communities are saying, you know what, we kind of like the security aspect. No matter your politics, you want to keep your family safe. You want to make sure that there's not a shooting down the street. And, you know, it's the hard reality of, you know, keeping streets safe. And I think politically it's a tough thing for Democrats to walk.
So Mark Penn, as you know, a Democratic strategist, worked for the Clintons. The president has decided to take tough measures to reduce crime, he writes. And early indications from D.C. is that, like the border policy, it's working. So one has to wonder why these issues like the open border and high urban crime problems were allowed to fester rather than to be tackled head on, and even obviously exacerbated for a few years, resulting in tens of thousands of deaths. But even more of a mystery is why we allowed over 75,000 people to die of fentanyl in 2023 and 50,000 to die in 2024. So I'll take a step back for a second. This is me now. The president says, it bothers me so much I locked down the border. It bothers me so much I've declared the cartels terror organizations. It bothered me so much we go to the genesis of the narco movement, which is in Venezuela. I sent 2 destroyers down there. I decided to put tariffs on China because the precursors are coming from there. He's eased them since. So that's a guy focused on issues that matter.
Yeah, and the American people see that. And there's action and there's movement. It's not just talk. There's actual stuff happening. And that's why his approval rating is the highest it's been in the Associated Press. That's why people are saying the actions that he's taking on those fronts specifically are meeting with their approval. So I think it's just a tough thing to fight the other way. And we saw this in the election with immigration. When there was all this, it's not a big deal, it's not a problem, and yet it is a problem for states all across the country, and now it's 0 illegal immigrants released month after month. That's a big difference.
So are you gearing up for your book tour, or are you just not, you're going to get through Labor Day first? Are you all set?
I am all set. I'm ready to go. I'm excited about it. You know this process. It's once you see it and you physically get it, I haven't gotten the hard copy yet, but then it's real, and then I'll have, 2-3 weeks. I'm not like you where you go 5 weeks across the country to like Alaska and every place else, but I'll put a good 2 weeks around many presidential libraries, and I'll put it all on my website, BretBaier.com, where you can see and get book signings and stuff.
To rescue the American spirit, Teddy Roosevelt and the birth of a superpower. It's really great. And plus, people are in the spirit of loving the country again. So now we're with the 250th birthday looming, and so much happened in 1775. It's really a chance to pick it up and understand our history. Bret, good luck tonight.
We'll see you.
All right. On Special Report, 6 p.m. Eastern Time.